We've set the basic settings for the application, like the name, and we've gotten back the ID number and the 2 keys from Facebook. I'm not going to go through each of these settings at this point. What I'm going to do is talk about authentication and the canvas, because those are the 2 sets of settings, in addition to basic, that you need to set in order to get started developing. Then we'll come back later on and talk about profiles and the other settings. Under authentication, what you need to set is where this application can be installed, or by whom or by what it can be installed. Most Facebook applications are installable by users. Some can be installed to Facebook pages, some can be installed to both. The default setting is only for users. So you know where you want your Facebook app to be installed. Make sure that setting is correct. Down here are 2 callback URLs. You don't need to set them now, but it's important to know that they're here, and you're going to see some other callback URLs throughout the settings. A callback URL is a URL often off of Facebook, and a ping is sent to that URL with some information when something happens. For example, this URL here, which cannot be a Facebook page, this URL gets a ping after a user has authorized your application. This URL gets a ping when the user has removed your application. So if you want to know, the only thing you can store of Facebook data is the Facebook ID. You can't store friends' IDs and so forth. But if you have a data store or a database in which you are storing information that you have collected, then you may want to remove that once the user has removed your application. So we'll come down here to Canvas, and you can see I've been playing around because I have an error up here, and I'm going to show you how I generated that error. The Canvas page URL is very, very important. These are essential. You can't proceed without them. One is the URL that will complete apps.facebook.com/yourappname. Now, I typed in a name here that I know is already in use, and I know it's in use because it's one of my other applications. And when I clicked Save at the bottom of the window, I got this error message. It says the URL you requested is already taken. So you need to construct a URL. This will be public. You need to construct a URL that has some significance. It may be meaningful. It may have something to do with your application. It can be this can be a cycle here, because you may decide what to name your application based on the URL you can get. And this isn't just a Facebook issue. This is an issue with URLs throughout the web. Sometimes the product is named for an available URL. Now remember that in Facebook is serving up the frame around the window, and you are responsible for drawing the content in the middle on the canvas. And this is the callback URL. This is on your site. This is the URL where Facebook goes to get your pages. Now, the Canvas callback URL, as I said, is on your site. And what this is a URL that is a path. So it's yoursite.com, and then you may have intermediate directories. I often have a directory for production, another one for development, and then within that I might have Facebook, and I might have, in this case I'll call this JFBirds / and this is the directory in which all of the files will be stored that Facebook needs to get to. You don't have to use this naming convention. You can use any convention that you want, but this URL is going to end with a / because it's a path in which Facebook is looking for the individual pages. Now, if you use a convention such as this, you can come back here and edit the settings and you can, for example, change this from prod to development or development to prod, and just with that one change in this path, you can switch from one environment to another as you are developing the application. What I tend to do is to have a real application with a real path, which is the prod path, and then I have another couple of applications that I use for testing, and I will change, so it's a testing application, and I will change, this might be dev, and I might change JF birds to JF animals, which is another path for another application, but I can use the same application in Facebook for testing two apps, and it's just by changing the callback URL that I can switch from one to the other. There are more URLs down here that you can use for bookmarks, a redirect, and down here the major things that you have to look at is, I've been talking about the canvas, this central thing within the Facebook frame where you use FBML, Facebook Markup Language. You can also use an iframe that you fill with your own content. In this tutorial, I'm talking about FBML because it's one of the most common ways of developing Facebook apps. It's also the most Facebook-ish. And the size of an iframe could be either of these choices, resizable or smart size. The canvas width can be what it used to be in the old days of Facebook, or it can be the full width. These are the default settings now. And you can use quick transitions, which are a relatively recent addition to Facebook and are worth experimenting with because, as it says over here, you will skip the reload of the Facebook frame. It's going to be faster. So although the default setting here is off at the moment, my advice to you is turn it on unless you have a problem. And those are the settings that you must set in order to get the basic authentication, the application ID and the two keys. You need to provide the name of the application, the user visible name of the application, and you have to agree to the terms of service. Then you have to provide the canvas information here, specifically these two required URLs, and in profiles you have to determine at the very least where the application can be installed, users or pages or both. And now you're ready to actually write code.